Hello and welcome to the Medicinal Herbs podcast from Holistic Matters. In this episode, we're talking about the superheroes of the plant kingdom, with key pharmacological effects on the nervous, endocrine, and immune systems. Our guest this month is naturopath and medical herbalist Amanda Williams, who calls this group of botanicals the multitaskers of the plant kingdom.
Well, we are excited to have a very interesting topic today because it's really about this intersection of neuroendocrine and immune and how the botanicals that have this opportunity really are the superheroes of the plant kingdom. And Amanda's here today, Williams, with us to really go through this, to really kind of dive deep into this unique conversation about neuroendocrine immune. So, Amanda, as we think about this botanical section, maybe it's best if we break down what does neuroendocrine immune botanicals really mean in each of those sections and how they intersect and why is that important?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much, Sarah, for the opportunity to talk about these, as I call them, superheroes of the plant kingdom, as you said, because I think these are really essential therapeutics for modern life. So what we're discussing here today is ancient plant remedies, and they have been used for thousands of years throughout different traditional medicine cultures around the world, which are absolutely perfect for our modern times that we're living in with the crisis burnout, chronic fatigue, chronic stress, immune depletion, and so on. It's, if we needed these herbs at any time in our world, it's right now. So you've probably heard of adaptogens. These are well-known category of botanicals that we know and love. Well, there's this special subgroup of adaptogens that, based on recent research by the incredible Dr. Alexander Panossian and his research colleagues, that has expanded our understanding of how we can use these botanicals for the neuroendocrine immune systems. So they have pleiotropic pharmacological effects on these three different systems. So the nervous system, endocrine, and immune systems. But it's like those shopping ads, but wait, there's more, because they go far beyond just those three systems. They act body-wide. And these herbs offer clinical versatility. They have these multi-target effects. So I'd like you to think of these neuroendocrine immune botanicals as being the multitaskers in the plant kingdom. Now, many herbs, as we know, are multitaskers, but these are the multitaskers extraordinaire. They are unbelievable in what they can achieve in the body, and they trigger a whole range of intracellular and extracellular adaptive signaling pathways that promote cell survival and the organism's resilience to stress, i.e. us as a human, our resilience to stress. Now, we are not living in caveman times anymore, where we might have had a bit of stress of running from a tiger and then we rested for a few days. We are having constant stress in different realms. It might be constantly being available for work. It might be stress of kids and, homeschooling. It might be, looking for a job, and there's many, many different stresses that we're suffering from all the time, and stress in our environment as well, from the environmental toxins and so on, and lack of sleep. So these botanicals help to regulate our metabolism and homeostasis. So they're keeping us in balance, and they do this via their effects on expression of our stress hormones. So things like cortisol, CRH, which is your corticotrophin releasing hormone, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, urocortin, neuropeptide Y, and many others, the list goes on. So the point of sort of saying all of these things at the moment is that I'm trying to stress to you how amazing they are in multitasking. So it brings us back to, these are more than just adaptogens. They have many different actions within the body to support our stress response to modern life on the neuroendocrine immune systems.
So maybe we need to clarify just again with the audience, like what an adaptogen is and why is that a key aspect. We know that these are adaptogens, but what does that mean? Why is that important to the body?
Yes, absolutely. Well, adaptogens have been known and loved for, decades in herbal medicine and for complementary medicine, clinicians. They are basically metabolic regulators that work to increase our resistance to stress and therefore increasing our ability to adapt. So we know that a key thing is adaptability and also promoting our survival. But I'd like you to think about it more as being adaptogens are agents for thriving. That's how I think of them. They're thriving agents for our body. So they act non-specifically to help normalize our biology. So it doesn't matter what's going on, it will help to bring it into balance. And the original concept of an adaptogen was based on Dr. Hans Sellier's work. And I'm sure you've all heard of Dr. Hans Sellier, who wrote his theory of stress and homeostasis back in 1936, believe it or not. And he was a Canadian professor and wrote over 1,000 different articles and I think 39 books on stress. He was really prolific in his research and his writings, and is still considered today to be the father of modern stress. And the term adaptogen was defined by Dr. Nikolai Lazarev, who was a Russian scientist who was very interested in looking at both synthetic and plant compounds that helped you thrive and survive. And in the early Russian research, they talked about resistogens. So they were talking about something that would help you to resist illness and to survive. So they called them resistogens, which I think is a good term. I'd like to call them thrivogens. That's my term for them. And so the concept is that, this repeated mild exposure or low doses of stress induce the increased resistance of our cells and the organism, the human, to subsequent stress exposure. So resulting in this adaptation favoring survival. So it's this concept of hormesis. So the adaptogens are hormetic agents. So if we look at Nietzsche, he said that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And this is the same concept for adaptogens. So they are plant compounds that actually cause a mild amount of stress to the body that then trigger an adaptive response. So I'd like you to think about it in the concept of, say, for example, resistance weight training. You're stressing the muscle, but over time, that muscle is responding and getting bigger and stronger. And then you're able to lift more weight. It's also the same concept of hormesis with, ice bathing, which is incredibly popular now. So you're stimulating your body through stress of that ice bath to become stronger, and it promotes your immune system and your resilience. So this is the concept of adaptogens and as in hormetic agents. Now, if we look at the plants, and I'm obsessed with the plants and how they grow and the environments that they grow in. So many of these plants that we use as adaptogens have survived the Ice Age. They have been around for centuries, and they still to this day continue to thrive in some of the world's harshest environments. So if we take an example of rhodiola, which we all know and love, so Rhodiola rosea, it grows around the North Pole. So it's a circumpolar herb growing in some of the harshest, coldest environments, where in the summertime, there's 24-hour daylight, extreme UV, and then in the wintertime, there's no light at all. There's very dry environment, and rhodiola thrives in this, and it also can thrive at high elevation. So it grows in mountains in Japan, for example, in Mongolia, but it also will grow at sea level, just growing in rocks. So these plants have compounds which are called secondary metabolites. And these secondary metabolites are the defense system of the plant. That's what helps it grow and survive and, defend itself from animals in its environment. And those secondary metabolites are the phytochemicals, the plant chemicals that we take then as a herbal tablet or a herbal liquid. So we're getting these special plant compounds, which I like to think of as guidance system for the plant to help it thrive and survive. We're taking those compounds into our body, which then causes us a little bit of stress. But ultimately, like the weight training analogy, it will make us stronger. So that's the concept of adaptogens.
So if we think of adaptogens and stress, as we talked about, and we think of kind of this this concept of chronic stress, it could be from your job, or maybe there is an illness that keeps stressing you. So how can adaptogens and specifically neuroendocrine immune botanicals have an impact on that chronic stress? Occasional stress rate is important. It's when it becomes chronic that's when we see these real negative effects in our overall health.
That's exactly right, because we become depleted, and so we don't feel that we can adapt and respond and be resilient as much, and so we become more and more depleted, and over time our immune system becomes depleted, etc. So what these neuroendocrine immune botanicals and adaptogens can do for us is that they really help to improve our stamina and reduce fatigue. So they're working on the HPA axis, so our hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, to help improve our stamina, our energy, our resilience. But it's really important to note that they're not stimulants. So it's not like having a really beautiful espresso coffee that's going to give you that bit of a boost, or taking other, caffeinated drinks, for example, that you might buy in a can. They're not going to give you that stimulant effect, which over time, those stimulants will deplete you even further. So adaptogens will give you that build of energy, but not that depletion. So you'll continually build and improve your stamina and your resilience overall. They enhance your exercise performance as well. So there's been studies that have been shown to improve your VO2 max level, so improving your cardiac aerobic output, and also to improve your overall recovery time and so on. And some of the early research that was done by the Soviets was done on long distance runners in very, very cold environments. And then they also looked at a whole range of different athletes, from sprinters, weightlifters, jumpers, etc. And they found that using these neuroendocrine immune botanicals, that they improved their overall output and reduce their recovery time. So then they also then use them in the Olympic athletes back in the sort of 70s and 80s as well. They improve your ability to adapt to the mental and cognitive stress that you might be under. So you're improving your ability to think more clearly, have better decision-making ability, and to improve your overall physical capacity for that cognitive function. So they've done studies, for example, in hospital emergency departments with the medical doctors, and they've shown that they had improved not only stamina and resilience, but improved decision-making and memory. So they support your innate immune function, which is important because that's your primary defense system. So if you think about it in terms of if you've got this defense system that's around your body, that's going to be your number one protection. So that's your innate immune system. And you've got to have that working optimally so that your adaptive immune system works optimally as well. And adaptogens can support that. And particularly the neuroendocrine immune botanicals have been shown to have a great effect on the immune system, even increasing like natural killer cell number and white cell count and so on. And then they also have been shown in different studies to improve mood. So things like there's been studies in anxiety, in depression, and just generalized low mood, which is called asthenia. So that just feeling fed up, and you can't get out of that funk. Adaptogens are brilliant for that, and you'd use them with your nervous system tonics as well. They also help to balance blood sugar and regulate metabolism. So that's very important because when we're very chronically stressed, we tend to sort of perhaps eat more carbohydrates or more chocolate, and we're craving, our blood sugar tends to be a bit low. And so taking adaptogens will really help that. The other thing that's important when we're stressed is our blood pressure normally increases, and adaptogens have been shown to reduce blood pressure and overall support cardiovascular function and reduce inflammation. So they wouldn't be my primary for supporting inflammation lowering, but you're definitely getting that side benefit as a consequence of taking these. So overall, they're really essential for good health, your adaptability. So chronic stress is about your adaptability to be able to cope with what is going on mentally and physically, and also to reduce your fatigue, improve your stamina, improve your emotional well-being overall. And they have also been shown to be beneficial for healthy aging. So these are something that I definitely put everyone on who's 50 and over. But I have to say, most of my patients are all on adaptogens. They are one of my go-tos, and there's such a great selection of different ones that you can choose from that help in many different ways. And thanks to the great work, as I said, by Professor Alexander Panossian, we now know a lot more about these botanicals. And he also has done work on these herbs in immune depletion. And I think it's really important for us to understand that adaptogens aren't just about energy. I hope by now you've understood that they're way more than that. They are very much about supporting your innate immune system, and they've been shown to have a direct antiviral effect, have that sort of anti-inflammatory effect as part of your immune-driven inflammation. And they also have a detoxification and reparation of oxidative stress that's induced by DAMPs and PAMPs, your damage activating molecular pathogen, etc. So you've got a lot of opportunity with adaptogens and neuroendocrine immune botanicals particularly to work on so many different aspects of what that patient may be presenting with. So if you're not sure which botanicals to choose, I would say choose these always, because they're going to make the difference for that patient.
So let's think about now what these specific herbs, and let's dive in maybe one-on-one on which of the neuroendocrine immune botanicals that are adaptogens that we would use? Like which of those herbs? I mean, you talked about rhodiola a little bit earlier, but what other in that spectrum are you thinking and that you would utilize with patients?
Yes, well, this is so interesting because at this point in time, based on the research, there's five botanicals that have been shown in the research to have all of these broad spectrum actions. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't possibly get some of these actions from the other adaptogens that we know and love. So I'm not saying discard your other adaptogens by any means, but we need to just look more carefully at what we are choosing if we want this full neuroendocrine immune pleiotropic activity. So the five that we're going to talk about are Korean ginseng, Eleutherococcus, so Eleuthero, Schisandra, Ashwagandha, and Rhodiola. Now, to help you remember them, I've come up with a mnemonic and it's GEARS. So the G is for Korean ginseng, so the ginseng. E is for Eleuthero, A for Ashwagandha, R for Rhodiola, and S for Schisandra. So GEARS. And I like that because you're gearing up as well with these herbs. You know, they're helping to change the gears in your body and help to get you back on track again. So the first one we'll discuss is the ginseng. And specifically, we're talking about the Korean ginseng, which is, I have to say, one of my absolute favorite herbs. And I use it a lot. And personally, I take it every single day. It was discovered about 5,000 years ago and at one point was worth more than gold. And I think we need to remember these traditional uses and traditional history because it helps us understand how valuable those herbs are still today. And this is one of the herbs that has been shown in the research to be a very significant neuroendocrine immune botanical. So still today, it's regarded in Asia as the king of all herbs. So I want you to imagine this Korean ginseng root with a big crown on it because it's the king of all herbs. And the genus name Panax originated from the Greek Panaxos, which means all medicine. So it's a panacea for all diseases, so a cure for all diseases. That's how they named it. And it has this amazing amphoteric effect. It normalizes function. And the key thing about Korean ginseng is that there is a lot of myths and misunderstandings, I have to say, about it's too stimulating and it's, can increase blood pressure. Well, there's never been a case in my clinic that I have seen that. And there's no information at all to support that in the research. And what I would say is that this is a definite myth. If you're using good quality Korean ginseng, and this is where the key thing is, some of these herbs may be not the real deal. So they're going to be an adulterated Korean ginseng, sometimes even adulterated with caffeine. And there's been horrific cases in the past where they've been adulterated with synthetic stimulants as well. So you want to get a real good quality Korean ginseng that's the proper thing, the main root of the herb. And we could talk a lot about quality, but we won't go on about it. But it has to be at least 6 years old and before it's picked. And it must be the right parts of the plant. So if you get that, you will get the most normalizing herb, this amphoteric effect. And you will actually find that if blood pressure is high, it will lower it to normal. So it's not going to stimulate blood pressure and, raise it, etc. But the one thing I would say about all of these adaptogens and neuroendocrine immune botanicals is you must be careful about how many caffeinated drinks the person is having. Because when someone is very depleted, they often turn to caffeine to keep them going. So you must assess that as part of your consultation to ensure that they, are aware of the negatives of the caffeinated drinks and that they're not taking lots of that with these adaptogens. Because as soon as you start improving the HPA axis function with these herbs, they aren't going to need the caffeine anymore. So with Korean ginseng, it has a very tonifying effect and it's adaptogenic. It's also really immune modulating. It has a positive effect on the immune system, increases white blood cells and so on. It significantly enhances cognitive function. So you are going to really enjoy the effects of it if you feel any brain fog or brain fatigue. So I use it a lot for patients who have very stressful jobs and have, a lot of creative thinking or strategic thinking, or even for university students or school students. You want to be thinking about Korean ginseng and Rhodiola and some ginkgo to help with studying, and maybe add some bacopa in there as well. It really helps to improve your mitochondrial support. So it's shown to improve mitochondrial biogenesis and mitochondrial output. So when we're fatigued and chronically fatigued, like with chronic stress, our mitochondrial energy is depleted. So Rhodiola and Korean ginseng have specifically been shown to improve mitochondrial biogenesis and mitochondrial output. And it's been shown to be a fabulous cardiotonic. So here you go. It's been used in Asia for centuries for the elderly and everyone over 50, wide, massive scale use in people over 50, which, seeing as I'm now over 50, I'm refusing to call 50 the middle-aged or elderly. So you want to be thinking about it.
It's young.
Exactly, Sarah. Thank you. You want to be thinking about Korean ginseng as an anti-aging tonic, because based on the research, that's what it is. It's so beneficial in downregulating inflammation, improving immunity, improving your antioxidant capacity in the body and so on, all the things we need for aging. And if you've got any male clients that need to have support for erectile dysfunction, low sperm count, any fertility issues, Korean ginseng is your go-to, and combine that with ashwagandha. So that's sort of a quick insight to Korean ginseng, but you really need to make sure you've got the right quality product, and it will provide a wide range of support. And just want to mention, because I said it's great for male fertility, don't think it's only for men. It's unisex. You can, all these herbs aren't specifically for any one gender. So
I was fascinated, and you had my gears turning. That the idea of using ginseng and then making sure you moderate your caffeine intake because it's going to have this positive effect on the HPA axis. I think that's just a really fascinating concept to think about, right? That if we can kind of moderate and bring ourselves back to homeostasis, we probably don't need that stimulation that we would get otherwise.
That's exactly right, because when we improve the overall resilience, so this is an adaptive stress response, we don't need those sugars, the carbs, we don't need the caffeine, we don't need the fries, the burgers, right, all of the stuff that you crave when you're depleted and exhausted. You don't need all of that because your blood sugar is balanced, your inflammation is reduced, your HPA axis is in function. And the other thing about chronic stress is that it has an effect on your thyroid hormones as well. So you get a depletion in the conversion of T4 to T3. And so what you then end up doing is you're on a pathway of low thyroid function, and potentially if your chronic stress continues and you've got that immune depletion, you may potentially end up in a situation where you've got Hashimoto's. Mm-hmm. So you've got to address this stress situation and this chronic depletion. Don't think you can just work your way out of it over time. And, you know, if I sleep more, or if I, you know, rest more, etc., you need to correct the metabolic chemical deficiencies in the body, you know, the dysfunction that's going on. And you need to do that by using these herbs.
All right. So what's the next one?
Okay, our next one, and I'm sort of doing this in an order of history, really, because, you know, Korean ginseng was sort of like the archetypal adaptogen that was used around the world. Then the Soviet researchers wanted to find something to use on the mass population, and Korean ginseng was too expensive and very, very difficult to grow, and lots of quality issues, etc. So then they looked for a herb that grew in the Soviet Union and was cheap. And here comes our little thorny bush called Eleutherococcus centicosus, or we know it as Eleuthero. And it's a little thorny bush, incredibly hardy, grows in sort of the forests of Siberia, Mongolia, northern China and Japan, and actually has been used in TCM, so in traditional Chinese medicine, since about 190 AD, and also has been used in Siberia for thousands of years as well. And in those both cultures, used for increasing stamina, endurance, and also quality of life, so that feeling of well-being, and to support immune function. So this herb is probably the most well-researched herb in our sort of over the history of herbal research out of any herb. It's been extensively researched. And in 1958, Dr. Israel Breckman, who worked with Dr. Lazarev, the person I said about earlier, who defined the term adaptogen, Breckman wrote the first sort of official monograph for the Soviet Union on this herb in 1958. And then that led to enormous wide-scale use and massive clinical trials. So clinical trials we could only dream about possibly doing these days, you know, so they did it in thousands of people. So whether it's deep sea submarine mariners, deep sea divers, mine and mountain workers, so mountain rescue workers, you know, long distance truck drivers. And they did these mass clinical trials, which has afforded us this body of research, which has then obviously been built on as well in modern times. So it's not just historical research we have. But what's interesting about these mass clinical trials is that they showed that Eleuthero is the archetypal adaptogen. It's so beneficial for broad scale use, which is really interesting to understand, because this is like the herb that would be suitable for everyone. And the other thing to consider as a clinician in these modern times is that it's very affordable. So Eleuthero is one of the most affordable adaptogens, neuroendocrine immune botanicals that you can buy today. Now, there are quality issues to do with it, so you need to make sure you're buying the real deal. But it's very, very good for everyone. And this was the herb that they used for like the Russian cosmonauts and Russian Olympic athletes. So it's more adaptogenic than tonic. So Korean ginseng was much more tonifying. So that will, you know, give you that much more sort of boost of energy, whereas Eleuthero is much more slow acting. But don't think that it's slow acting and you won't feel it. You absolutely will, particularly if you're in like phase 2, phase 3 adrenal depletion, have that chronic stress, and particularly if you have chronic low immunity. This is where Eleuthero shines. It's fabulous. It's known as the king adaptogen, whereas Korean ginseng was the king of all herbs. This is the king adaptogen. And it has really great benefits in improving immune function, significantly increasing natural killer cells, T helper cells, and particularly it's very beneficial for chronic respiratory conditions. So thinking here about your patients who have chronic bronchitis, or even that chronic recurrent acute bronchitis, where they're having a bronchitis 3 times every winter, you need to be having them on Eleuthero the whole time, plus echinacea root, obviously. And then when they have the outbreaks of bronchitis, you need to be using the appropriate respiratory herbs, which you could talk about in another session. But it was also very good in the trials. What they showed was Eleuthero was great for reducing stress, cognitive, mental, physical stress, when you're in an environment, when you're working in an environment where there's occupational stress. So that could be stress from pressure of how much you've got to work. So you've got to think about, they did a lot of these trials in big factories, and they found that even with these repetitive, boring tasks, that the people had greater output, greater sense of well-being, reduced sick days, et cetera, et cetera. So any occupational stress and environmental stress as well, you want to be thinking about Eleuthero. It's also been shown to be beneficial for lowering elevated lipids and improving blood glucose. And this one is very safe for everyone and can be used long term. And that's how I would use it for most people. So Eleutherococcus is your safe long-term adaptogen to support that chronically immune, chronically stress depleted person. And I would say use this in conjunction, if you've got immune issues, with echinacea root as well, just to add a bit more support there. So that's our Eleuthero.
Eleuthero is one of those kind of, and I love the order you're going in, to move it forward, historically. And Eleuthero just has, so many opportunities to support kind of that chronic patient, right? And I love the recommendation with echinacea too, right, in combination. So as we think the next herb, where are we at? We're at one of my favorite, I think, right? Ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha, that's right. And I always remember the wonderful Dr. Michael Dobbins at this point, because Dr. Michael Dobbins, he sadly passed away, obviously, but we still know and love him dearly. He used to say ashwagandha like he was casting a magic spell. So he would do ashwagandha, so like abracadabra. And I love the thought of that, because this is a magical herb. It really is. It's Indian ginseng is the other name for it. And the botanical name is Withania somnifera. And the somnifera is from the Latin som, to sleep. So you get an idea that this herb is calming. So it's from the Indian Ayurvedic medicine tradition, and it's a herb that's in this classification called Rasayana remedies. And the Rasayana basically means the path of life, or the essence of life. These are life-giving herbs, life-promoting. And so here we're thinking about, they're not only improving how you're feeling right now, but they're also for that long-term anti-aging, health span, longevity. That's how the Ayurvedic clinicians look at ashwagandha. So it's been used for thousands of years. As I said in my intro, many of these herbs have been used for thousands of years, but modern research still validates its use. And ashwagandha is one of the herbs that's had a lot of modern research, thank goodness. Now, the root of the ashwagandha plant, which is what we use, is said to smell like a horse. And as a consequence, it's also meant to give you the power of the horse when consumed. So I love to think about a big Arabian stallion. This is what ashwagandha can give to you. So unlike some of the other herbs that we've talked about, this herb is a small, sort of nondescript shrub, and it grows anywhere. So it grows even on wasteland, even on sort of big rubbish tips, it will grow and thrive. Now, the problem with that is that because ashwagandha grows anywhere, there's lots of different quality issues and there's lots of different chemotypes. So you've probably heard of chemotypes when we talk about cat's claw. Well, the same goes for withania or ashwagandha. There's different chemotypes. And so why that's important is that the different chemotypes have different phytochemicals. And also there's been shown to have like seasonal issues when you pick ashwagandha as well. So there's lots more we could talk about quality, but we won't go on. So the thing I'm trying to stress to you here is that make sure you're buying a good quality ashwagandha. And I just read recently that in 2020, US sales of ashwagandha spiked 50%, 50%. So that is significant because there was a massive increase over the previous year. And what you have then is a situation where you're going to have more quality issues happening because there's so much demand. And obviously people want to buy the herb and they want to make sure that they're getting the best value. But I say best value means you've got to get best quality first. So ashwagandha is a very calming adaptogen. It really is supportive for the nervous system. It's a sedative, so it will help you sleep. And it's very anxiolytic, so calming for anxiety. But I don't want you to think that because it's calming and sedative, that it's not going to help your energy. It absolutely will, but it has that very sort of nice energy supporting effect. Meanwhile, sort of, it's like giving you a big hug at the same time and helping to nurture your nervous system. And it really helps to support your thyroid. So we know that ashwagandha helps to increase T4. And so if you've got improved output of T4, you can then hopefully, if you've got the right cofactors and the right gut and liver happening, you can convert that to T3. And so very beneficial for the thyroid in a low thyroid state. And you can use this in conjunction with bacopa as well to support the thyroid function and bladder wrack. So it's been shown to be beneficial for male and female reproductive function, including fertility, different aspects of fertility, and libido in both men and women. So if you're working with couples on fertility journeys, make sure you're thinking about ashwagandha as a key factor. Also has been shown to have an anabolic effect. So really helpful if you're wanting to do, weight training, combine it with Korean ginseng. And thinking here also about children who fail to thrive, maybe picky eaters, slow growth. Ashwagandha is perfect for those kids. And so I always like to think of it as a tonic for children because it's also nice and calming for children as well. So thinking here, perhaps if you've got children with ADHD or similar issues, you could be thinking about ashwagandha and bacopa, which has also been shown to be very beneficial for that. So I'd like you to think about ashwagandha for your patients, perhaps, that may be irritable, their mood is low, maybe quite reactive, or maybe crying quite a bit, their nervous sort of resilience is low, so they get very affected by things and they have that low energy. They are the people that will be perfect for ashwagandha. But it's also great to support your men and women that want to do weight training, your fertility clients, etc., and has also been shown to support testosterone. So thinking here maybe not just about men but women postmenopausally as well to help improve testosterone. So you want to be thinking about ashwagandha as an overall benefit, and it's very safe to use. You can use it long term, and you can use it alone as a single herb, or you can use it in combinations with other herbs, as with all of these.
No, I really think of ashwagandha as like a good mom. You know,
Oh,
a good
I
mom is
like
willing
that.
to give you a kick in the pants sometimes, and that's what ashwagandha can do, right? But then it also like gives you a hug so you can go to sleep, and that is just, you know, it's just one of those like amazing herbs that just really can change, you know, how you think about yourself and have a real impact. So I love ashwagandha, as you can tell. All right.
Yes, I love your analogy
Next,
as well.
ashwagandha. It's like a good mom. Um, so now we move on to rhodiola. So what about
That's
rhodiola?
so rhodiola is my other favorite with Korean ginseng, and I want you to think about rhodiola as resilience. So this is mental, emotional, physical resilience. And if we use the understanding of how the herb grows, I spoke about it a little bit earlier. It's a circumpolar herb, grows around the North Pole in these really harsh environments. It's a little succulent. And even though it's a little succulent, it actually takes 4 to 5 years to get the right um, length of the root and to get the right phytochemical profile. So it's once again another quality issue story. And there are lots of rhodiolas out there because this herb is so popular and has been for the past few years that we now have it as a status of rare and threatened, unfortunately. And there was a brilliant research article that came out recently, and the title was "We're Running Out of Time to Smell the Rose Roots," which is awfully sad. So the key thing as well is that we've got to buy from credible, sustainable sources, you know, because it is threatened and endangered. So it was used by Vikings to increase their physical endurance when they went on long journeys or when they went on raids. So this is the Viking herb. So I want you to imagine yourself as this really strong, tough Viking, and you've got amazing amounts of energy and strength and resilience. And it's being used in quite a number of different traditional medicine systems around the world in Europe, Asia, and Russia. So it was well known and well used and so highly regarded that in Siberia, it was always used as a bouquet for brides to signal longevity and healthy fertility. And so what we know from the modern research, it was well researched by the Soviets in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, but we've also got lots of modern research on it, which has sort of propelled the demand for it. It's been shown to have sort of really about equal adaptogenic and tonic effects. So it's a really well-balanced herb. It's very important for the immune system. So it has that benefit that I talked about with the other herbs, and has been shown in trials to be beneficial for depression. So this is the herb that will help with your nervous system, cognitive function, immune system. This is the other mitochondrial support. I spoke about it earlier with Korean ginseng. So Korean ginseng and rhodiola are the perfect partners. I use them in combination on a daily basis myself, and it supports mitochondrial biogenesis just like Korean ginseng. It's also a cardiotonic and supports antioxidant function. Now here, what I'm talking about with all of these herbs, when I say antioxidant, is I'm talking about upregulating NRF2 pathways. And that is your intracellular detoxification system. So, you know, your own production of your antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, etc. And Rhodiola has also been shown to be anti-inflammatory. So just like all of the other herbs, you can use it for a whole range of different conditions, and it's particularly beneficial used long term, and for the elderly or anyone over 50, very, very beneficial. Now, when I say this, it doesn't mean that you can't use it in younger people. Absolutely you can. But when we get to sort of 40s, 50s and on, we need to be using these neuroendocrine immune botanicals every single day. They are like your multivitamin, your whole food multivitamin. You need to be using these herbs every single day to support healthy aging. Now, what's interesting about rhodiola, it's lots of studies done on it, but I mentioned a bit earlier where they've done studies in emergency hospital departments with doctors, helping them to work their crazy shifts, their extended shifts, and to still have that precision and accuracy, memory, cognitive decision-making ability, and that physical stamina. And they've also shown beneficial effects in like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and also neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc. So this is your herb of resilience. And remember, it's the Viking herb to help you sort of differentiate between them all. And I know you might be thinking, oh, they all might sound a bit similar. They are similar. Overall, they're going to give you very similar effects, but there are subtle nuances. But if you're new to this, don't worry about whether or not you're choosing the right one. Just use it because you'll get benefits from it, and then you'll know as you go along, you'll become more accustomed to choosing which one.
And I think the other thing too is, each person is a little bit different. And so it's the right herb for that person, right, too.
That's right. And I think it's, what do you resonate with? Is there something that I said or something that you've read about these herbs that you resonate with? That is the right one for you. Don't be too arbitrary in your cognitive process. If there's something that you're drawn to, take it, because that is the right one for you.
I've heard Carrie say this, and I've heard a few others. You can only be more right, when you're choosing from the toolbox.
That's right. That's right. So now we're on our last one of today, and that is Schisandra. And once again, Dr. Dobbins used to say that like a magical spell as well. So Schisandra. So Schisandra chinensis is these beautiful little red berries, but what not a lot of people know is that they grow in vines, and when they're cultivated, it looks like wine grapes, so the grapevines that you might see in the Napa Valley or the south of France. So you've got these beautiful, stunning, bright red berries on these vines, and they do grow obviously naturally in the forests, but we want a cultivated source because we know then it's sustainable. And grows in the mountain forests of northern China, the Russian sort of Far East, and Korea. Been used for thousands of years, just like all of the others, and originally used by the Goldie and Nanai tribes to improve night vision and as a tonic to reduce hunger and thirst while they went on long, long days of hunting where they didn't have food. So they would just eat these little red berries to sustain their energy. It was actually first documented in TCM in about 1596, and the TCM name is Beiwuwezi, which is northern 5-flavored fruit. And the northern is key because there is another Schisandra that grows in the south of China, and that is a different species. So that has different phytochemicals, but often they are interchanged, unfortunately. So you get this substitution adulteration issue. And the other thing about the southern Schisandra is that grows in the habitat of the giant panda, which we already know is threatened. And so we don't want that habitat being cut down to grow Schisandra. So we want to make sure we're buying northern Schisandra, so Beiwuwezi, and get the right quality of that herb as well. Now, it's an amazing support overall, Schisandra. So I like to think of Schisandra as the stabilizer. So if something's out of balance, it will bring it back into stability. So this is very calming for the nervous system, similar to ashwagandha. It has a nervine tonic effect and is very beneficial for depression, anxiety, extremely beneficial for irritability, reactiveness. Somebody's a bit snappy and moody. Schisandra is your go-to. So think of Schisandra as soothing and stable. It's also been shown to have hepatoprotective effects, and that means it supports the health of the liver. Now, there's an old saying, I'm livid. When someone's very angry, they might say, I'm livid. Well, that's based on the word liver. And in olden times, we used to say that somebody was very liverish because they were very moody and reactive. So Schisandra is beneficial from that perspective on mood, but it also supports phase 1, phase 2 detoxification of the liver. So you're getting that benefit. And it's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant through that NRF2 pathway. And the other key thing, which is important, is it's antitussive. So this is a herb that you can use as part of your respiratory protocols to help support the reduction in coughing, so to stop that cough response. So we don't often think about Schisandra for that, but that's how it's been used traditionally. And when I was living in Japan, that's how we always used it for someone who had cough, lots of phlegm in the head, and headaches because of that phlegm and congestion. So another aspect which has been used traditionally is for night sweats and hot flashes. So in TCM, they use Schisandra for drying up excess fluids. And I think that's why it's beneficial for excess phlegm as well and excess mucus. So drying up excess fluids, so thinking anywhere where you might need that, Schisandra is your go-to. But if you want to think about Schisandra as your stabilizer, so if energy is low, it will bring it back into balance. If mood is low or reactive, balance. And also beneficial for the liver function as well, which sometimes when someone's chronically stressed, they might be drinking a lot of alcohol and, or doing other certain recreational drugs. So you want to be supporting the liver in those patients. So that's the basic sort of overview of Schisandra, and beneficial for sleep as well, just like ashwagandha.
So we dived really deep into the gears and how they have a positive role in this neuroendocrine immune response. And so any last kind of thoughts as we close up this podcast today? Any last kind of ideas around this that we need to make sure that the practitioners understand?
Yeah, sure. Well, I hope by now you understand that these are essential for life. These are superhero botanicals. They're multitaskers in terms of their pharmacological effects. So they're essential for everyone every day, just like your whole food multivitamin complex. Now, you've got to buy the right quality, as I said. So that's a key factor that you need to make a judgment on. Buy a sustainable source, buy good quality, get the real deal. Otherwise, you're not going to get the effects I've spoken about. If you want to read more about any of these, have a look at Dr. Alexander Panossian's work. Free papers available on PubMed. And I'd like to close with a quote from Dr. Panossian. He said that adaptogens function like stress vaccines to activate the body's defense system and metabolic rate, reversing the negative physical effects of stress and restoring the body's balance and health.
Wow, impactful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to the Medicinal Herbs podcast from Holistic Matters. For more education on all of the herbal medicinals mentioned in today's episode, please visit holisticmatters.com. That's holistic with a W.